Hello, crafty viewers. I'm Myhre of Quilt as Inspired. This is a book that I wrote to not only teach quilt as you go, but also to design as you go. So this is really fun. You'll have to check it out. But I've got another fun hand stitch project to share with you. It's called the Chinese Lantern Project Box. And this is just a box that's been constructed with grid work is underneath. You kind of put them together like cards, like a house of cards kind of thing. And how this came to be, I road travel a lot. I spend a lot of time in my Airstream, cruising around, and I always have like little bits of yarn and needles and hooks with me. So a lot of times I'll just pick up some yarn and I'll start knitting or crocheting, just flowers, leaves, shapes, whatever. And then as I'm doing that, I start to think, gosh, what could I do with these? Where would they go? And in this case, I decided to do this functional box. There's a hole in one side so you can knit from it if you want to, but you don't have to do it that way either. You can just have it as a project box to store, if you're like me, one of your million projects you've got going on. I love creating like this too because it's folk art. It's this functional box, but you make it so pretty, and it's a great way to just learn some new things. We're going to be doing some embroidery, some crocheting, some knitting. I'm going to show you a crazy patch. We're going to do a crocheted mandala. So these are just 5.5 to 6 inch blocks that we're going to make. And of course, you don't even have to do the box. You could use that for anything you want to play with, whether it's, in a quilt, or you can make pillows out of it or whatever. It's just a really fun way to play. And here's another idea too. I love making these journals, these little art journals, because when I just need some inspiration, I'll go through and I'll just peruse the pages of things that I've done in the past just to get inspiration or to remember some of the things that I've done, because I do a lot of different things and it's easy to forget or to lose that idea that maybe I had one day. So that's a really cool thing to do too. So this tutorial is basically going to be how to make the box. So we're going to start with crocheting the yarn around the box, and I'll give you a heads up on the materials and everything that you'll need for that. And then we're just going to do a couple weeks of like different squares that you can make. We're going to do, like I said, the crochet mandala. We'll do a mandala with embroidery. I want to do a crazy patch. So my next box, like this one, we're going to do some freeform, of course. That's my favorite thing. I love freeform. But my next box is going to be a sampler, so I can teach you the different things and also learn and play with these things myself. So it's going to be really fun. You'll find a supply list and a link to my Etsy store on my website. So we're going to start with like just some grid work, and this is stuff that you would use just to do rug hooking. On my Etsy store I have the kit, so I'll have like all these pre-cut. You need this, some batting, some double-sided or single-sided Peltex, and then I also include the main yarn, which is the yarn that goes around all of this, and then the mesh part at the top, and the bottom is just a plain felt square. The background of all this is wool, but I will also be doing fabric in the embroidery in a hoop. So we're gonna learn all kinds of new stuff and stitch together. Make sure you join Mandala Unplugged on Facebook so that you can share your photos and share your ideas with your fellow stitchers. It's gonna be so much fun. I can't wait to see what you guys do. I can't wait to get started, so let's just go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so this is a size 3.75 rug hooking canvas. You'll want to cut a piece that's 21 holes by 21 holes. Make sure that you leave the little fringes when you cut the sides, like don't cut it straight on the edge. Otherwise that outer line can be weakened and it might come apart when you crochet, and then it makes it really difficult. And we can just cut the fringes off later. The piece will measure about 5 3/4 to 6 inches square. And then here are the measurements of the other pieces you'll need, so just hit pause and take a note. You can also find a full list of supplies and materials I used, and of course all kinds of different inspiration kits on my Etsy shop, and both of those have links on my website. So just hit myhrequilts.com and there'll be links if you go to like YouTube and Etsy page. So like any other crochet, you start with a slip knot on a hook. Insert the hook into the second square from the edges. And then with the yarn over the top, grab the yarn with your hook and pull it through and up to the edge of the grid. Yarn over again and pull through both loops. This is an elongated single crochet. And incidentally, if you're new to crochet, this is a relatively easy thing to do. Just try to keep the yarn as snug as you can. You know, the thing with crochet is once you get used to holding the yarn in the hook and you're really comfortable with that, crochet is really easy. But in the beginning, it's a struggle. So just keep with it. And then all of a sudden it'll click and one day you'll wonder what was so difficult. But I guess that's true of any skill. Okay, so you're going to want to crochet 2 stitches in each hole. So go back into the same place and make another elongated single crochet. And then as you work, you'll find the loop that's on the hook. It may loosen while you're inserting the hook into the grid. So if that happens, just let the yarn go and just start the stitch again. It's not a big deal. But then you'll be mindful just to keep the yarn as snug as you can while you insert your hook into the work. And this is a 3.75 millimeter, and these hooks are pretty great. They're made by Clover, and you can get them over at the big box stores. But play around with the different size hooks to see which works for you, because everybody crochets a little bit differently. So as long as you have a little bit of a range, you should be fine. And we're going to use some smaller hooks for the actual crochet in this project later. The yarn I'm using is Cotton Classic by Taki. Of course, you can use any worsted weight yarn, but I like the cotton sheen, and I know with use it won't fuzz up like wool does. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love fuzzy wool, but just not for this project. I wanted it to stay crisp. But if you need to practice, please scroll through my videos and find the 4-part beginning crochet series that starts November 5th, 2017, and that's like for the person who's never even picked up a crochet hook before. So those you might find useful. Don't worry about getting those stitches perfectly even though. I mean, as you can see, mine are pretty rickety. This is not a straight edge, but it's okay because they'll straighten up when you join the stitches. When you get to the corner, we're going to add a few more stitches to round it off. So finish your first 2 like you normally would. And then insert the hook into the same space and pull the yarn up all the way up to the corner. Work your single crochet and then do 2 more in the same hole, the same little spot there on the next side. So you'll sort of round the corner. It'll make this nice little rounded edge. And there is definitely a right and a wrong side to these. The right side, you'll see the tops of the stitches a little bit better. And then when you flip it the wrong side, you'll see the little fringes sticking out. And then just work all the way around. And then when you get back to the beginning, you're going to pop 2 stitches into the last 2 space there. And then insert the hook into the same space, pull the yarn up all the way to the corner, and then slip stitch to the very first single crochet that you did. And you'll have to play with it a little bit, spread the yarn out and try to cover the grid as best as you can. The yarn tails at the end, you'll be able to go in and maybe make an extra couple of stitches just in case any of that grid shows underneath. But pretty much this is all going to be covered, so you are good to go. And then just cut the yarn, maybe leave 6 to 8 inches and pull the yarn through. And then you'll have your pretty little framed grid that you can do anything you want with. I have an idea to do a few of these as wall hangings and then like crocheting some lacy and frilly frame around the edge. I think that would be so phenomenal. And you could do anything, old quilt blocks that you might have, or do an embroidery sampler and just do like a set of them and put them on a wall. I think that would be really pretty. So I might definitely do that. You might see some of those. And I will say this is the least fun part of this project. But working crochet in this way ensures that you have the exact number of stitches on each side, which you'll be so happy with when it's time to put these squares together. So next week we're going to start in with the freeform embroidery and crochet on the wool felt. But I like to pat it a little bit extra so it feels better and more cushiony when I'm stitching. And I just like the look of it. It's more quilt looking. So make sure you have the front side facing you. And you're going to place a 5-inch piece of batting right in the center. So with any extra thread or floss you have, do a large basting stitch, just like I'm showing here, to hold it in place as you stitch. I'm using 3 strands of DMC floss. You can use anything you want. Obviously, any color is fine, as it's going to be completely buried. You know, I don't always do this layer of batting. It totally depends on what I'm planning for the square. So in 2 weeks, we're going to work the embroidery mandala, and I'm going to add the batting to the hoop rather than onto the square, because again, when I'm stitching into something, I just really like that extra cushion of the batting. So, you know, as you're working these this week, just go ahead and work all 5 of your squares, just get it out of the way, and maybe just put the batting on one of them so that you're prepared to do the freeform stitching if you're following along with this video. So then for the background of the embroidery and the freeform crochet that we're going to do next week, I'm using a 5.5-inch piece of wool felt. And I love it because it's so nice to stitch into and it doesn't ravel on the sides. So it's the perfect fabric. I like the rounding corners of the grid, so I've decided to just round the corners of the felt. Just take a little tiny snip and round them, and it'll just lay in there really nicely. Probably not going to do that for all of the pieces, like for the embroidery. It's just going to be easier to do a little square, but I don't know. I thought it was kind of pretty, completely optional, of course. And if you want to use a different fabric as the background and not wool felt, you could always start with a 6-inch square and then just fold and press the sides under 1/4 of an inch on each side and then stitch it into place. And you can still do the seed stitch, which is what I'm going to show you next, just how to attach this felt to the background. So you'll center the wool felt so the edges are close and pretty much equal distance to the edge stitches. Use a similar or contrasting color of thread, whatever you feel like you want to use. Tie a knot at the end and start in the center, coming from the back and pulling up through the front, and then make just 2 tiny little stitches side by side. And that's all that is to the seed stitch. It's really easy. And then working out from there, about 1 inch away, make 2 more stitches, just working at a different angle. So it kind of looks like someone just threw a little bunch of seeds on there, and that's, I think, why they call it the seed stitch. Anyway, I think that's why they call it the seed stitch. I don't know. Makes sense to me. But I love the puffiness of it. Makes it look all quilty. And a lot of this will be covered, but the stitches that do show do create a nice effect, especially when the light hits it, and you'll get that sort of quilty texture, which is so awesome. And then just continue this way. I'm using, again, the 3 strands of the DMC floss in black, so it kind of puts a little shadow since the fabric itself is gray. But hey, if you want to use a contrasting color, why not? I think it'll look cool, especially when you have all the other embroidery and the adornments on it. So the piece of felt will shrink just a little bit. And so you'll get a little bit more, you'll see a little bit more of the crocheting that you've done, and it will shrink as we stitch on it, of course. So continue around, and when it's all done, it'll look like a little, like a biscuit or a cookie. These are the sides of the original box that I made laying side by side, just so you can see them all together. Next week, I'll be showing you a lot of the different embroidery stitches in the freeform knitting and crocheting that you're seeing here, so that you can build your own layout and make the box your own. And for your box, you can do all 4 sides this freeform way, or you can follow along with me in doing a sampler of all the different techniques that we're going to do. As long as your colors coordinate well, there'll be continuity to your project box, and it'll come out great. So whatever it is that you decide to do will be phenomenal, and I cannot wait to see what you're doing. I'm going to just talk through making the lining and joining really quick for the rest of this video, just in case you already have ideas and you're excited to kind of just get started and you want to work ahead a little bit. So I'm obviously not going to actually do the joining yet, as it's easier to work each piece as individual units. So as we move along, obviously I'll show you these in more detail. But for each lining piece, you'll need a piece of very heavy fusible stabilizer, such as Peltex or Pellon. It feels almost like a light cardboard. It's bendy, but it's stiff. And then a 6.5-inch piece of fabric. Place the fusible side down in the center of the wrong side of the fabric and fuse it down with your iron. If your Peltex is double-sided, obviously make sure you place a piece of parchment paper or silicone sheet on the top so that you don't get funk all over your iron. This, what I'm using right here, is one-sided, so what I'll do is I'll flip it over so that I can press the edges under, and then I'm just going to take quilter's glue and keep them in place. This is Quilter's Select Glue, and it is awesome. You can find this and other Quilter Select products at www.thequiltshow.com. When you get to the corners, then you'll be able to just press down the little flap and glue it in place, and it'll stay. The lining will be attached to the back of the piece, just like working a piece of applique, just with tiny stitches. But obviously I won't be doing that until I cut the fringes and have a finished front, because I want to be able to be as messy as I want to be and not have to worry about coming through on the back. The nice thing is that each one is done individually so that you can make as many squares as you want to, and then decide which 4 pieces to choose for your box, and then maybe some you'll frame, maybe some you'll put in a journal. I mean, the point of this whole workshop is just to learn and play and see how the different yarns and threads and fabrics act together. That is the fun part of doing a project like this. And then just like the lining, of course, we'll be joining these together in more detail once we have a couple of finished squares, but I'll talk you through it just in case you want to work ahead. There's a couple options for joining. The sides were done by slip stitching through each stitch, just matching up. You'd hold the wrong sides together, make sure that the right sides are both facing out, and then just insert your hook into each stitch and bring the yarn through as a slip stitch. It's super easy, and as I said before, all of the stitches will match up. Once I got to the bottom, I thought this is going to be way too cumbersome to crochet into, so all I did was I whip stitched it, and I found that that's actually really pretty too. So I may do that for the sides this time, only because it's going to save a ton of yarn, and then I can do a couple more like little crochet pieces with the main yarn, which is nice because it brings the edge and the main yarn kind of all together, and then it just makes the piece more cohesive. For this week, crochet around all 5 of your grid pieces and attach your batting to one of them. You can do your linings separately, whether it's 5 different fabrics or all the same. We'll work on the hand stitch pockets later, and then begin to gather yarns and beads and fabrics that you may want to use in your project. Some other fun things to gather would be old brooches, broken jewelry, found objects. You can peruse inspiration books, coloring books for copyright-free designs. And then again, be sure to join Mandala Unplugged on Facebook and share your photos, ask questions. I'll be available all the time, so we'll stay connected. The next series of videos will be posted on each Sunday in May, and I would imagine we'll probably even go into June because I have a lot of ideas that I want to share with you guys, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So until next time, be well, stay inspired, and happy stitching.